Hello and welcome to the Future of Podcast. This is so exciting. I was talking to one of our guests earlier about how this was an idea 2 weeks ago, and now we're recording our first episode. So thank you for listening. To anyone who's listening. My name is Prieeyya, and I'm the founder of a startup called Our Wave Hub. And I have two women that I look up to seriously joining me on the first episode today, and I cannot be more of a fangirl. Right now, with us, we have Val Fox, who is the co-founder of the DMZ. And for those of you who don't know, the DMZ is the world's leading incubator at Ryerson University, as well as Maggie Greyson, who is a designer futurist and runs her own innovation consultancy called Future is Present. We'll start with Val in a little bit about your background and how you got into the startup innovation space, and Val.
Oh, that was it?
That was it.
I was like, a little bit more. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you very much, Prieeyya. I'm very excited to be here. I'll just let you know that the questions you're about to ask us, because you gave us a preview, are very thought-provoking, so I think this is going to be fun. So thanks for having us. So I just wanted to say that although I am the co-founder of the DMZ, and it's done so amazing, I left 4 years ago to start a company called The Pivotal Point, where I'm helping to build incubators around the world. And also right across Canada, so from the Yukon all the way to Newfoundland, because working in the DMZ, I found that we kind of needed incubator-like environments, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I tell you my story. But we need them in every town, every city, every academic institution, and every corporation, and we all need to work together to enable the economy to thrive. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that. So let's pull it back. So one of the interesting things is that one of your questions, Prieeyya, got us thinking, Maggie and I, to think about, my goodness, how are we going to apply it to our experiences, and how can the audience who's listening to us now really understand where we're coming from and how we look at things. So I'm old. Start with that.
What? For any of you who are watching this right now, Val does not look. Are you kidding me?
Okay.
Old?
Well, I'm a grandmother. I'm 65, and I have two grandchildren. One's 11, one's 9, and two wonderful children.
This is crazy. She doesn't drink normal water. There's like something in her water.
You're adorable. Stop it. I'm trying to be serious here.
Okay, sorry.
Why I'm saying that is that I've been in tech, in digital, since the 80s, and I am a designer and an artist. That's what I always wanted to. I was going to illustrate children's books when I was coming out of university. That was my goal, and I ended up getting into design instead. And in the early 80s, this is when the digital age was really starting to be on everybody's mind, and it was being used in multiple ways. So after I went to Sheridan College, I started a business called Valerie Fox Graphic Design, and what we did is we really helped to build training modules with people. And how we worked was, because then tech was huge and really hard to work with, and so I needed to sit next to a coder who was coding things as I would try to design the interfaces that we would need for people to use training modules or to use tech at all, and we would have to work in that way. And through that, I actually got to really learn a little bit more about tech. I could code a little bit, but it was quite intricate, and so we had to work in teams. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. In my company, I had IBM as a client. Fabulous client, and they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was to be part of the very first multidisciplinary design team for enterprise software. What that meant was that I came in to work with all of these different brilliant people in tech, so whether they were developers or whether they were architects or they're marketing people or human factors people, we worked under the whole idea of human-centered design. Mm-hmm. This was just coming out, and this is in the early 90s.
Wow.
And it was super cool because now I got a taste of looking at design through multiple eyes. And together we created kick-ass enterprise software. In fact, a lot of the software that you're seeing today from IBM came from these teams that we worked on in the 90s. And it gave me an experience to see how it was actually a glimpse into the future. And that's why I wanted to tell that story. I ended up becoming a creative director of very, very large sites. One of my claims to fame was I was creative director for the Sydney Olympics, but other very, very large sites as well. I also have multiple inventions and patents that were under IBM, and one of them was for the universal shopping cart for the web, and some other stuff that had to do with how we use technology while we're watching TV. It's funny to say that
I did not know that. That is so cool.
So that was, again, in the 90s, before we had iPads, but we were kind of inventing those too. That was in very early 2000-something, 2001, 2002. And I ended up becoming the national practice lead for user experience there. And then I got a call, this is in 2007, I think, from Sheldon Levy, who became the president of Ryerson University. And he asked me to jump ship and go to Ryerson to help him make Ryerson more innovative and entrepreneurial. A whole bunch of stories in there, but what we ended up doing together through his vision to help young people create the new companies that are happening now was we designed the DMZ. We did not know that we were creating an incubator, but there you go, we did. And over the next 5-6 years, it became, when I left, it was named number 3 in the world. As far as the University Business Incubator, it has since become number 1 in the world, which is, we're quite proud of it. But I left in about almost 4 years ago now because I hit my glass ceiling. And the glass ceiling was, I wanted to take this all over the world. I wanted to ensure, as I was saying before, that we have these kinds of environments for people to create the new economy, which people-based economy, people-centric economy, using the same skills that I was learning when I was IBM, looking at things from a human-centered perspective. And so I built the Pivotal Point. And now, like I said, we're working around the world. So that's my story. Thanks for listening.
Okay, that's the end of the podcast. That was, wow, I did not know how much how much you've played a role in driving tech forward within the design context. Super cool. We also have with us today Maggie Greyson, who is as Val says, she lives in the future. So Maggie, tell us a bit about what you do, background, how you got to starting Futures Present, and where you're headed with that.
It's funny to be living in the future but talk about my history.
We don't.
So in the future, I will be idolizing all of your podcasts. And
let's hope so.
It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for bringing this opportunity.
Totally.
If I was going to go backwards, a couple of years ago, I heard somebody say that podcasts were going to be the next big thing, and I thought,
no way.
Here we are. So my background is I was a professional theater designer for 10 years, and I worked in Canada, the US, and England.
That is so cool.
I spent 10 years just watching actors and directors and writers and other designers just watch people minute by minute, second by second, with tiny little incremental changes that would completely revolutionize the narrative. And the background sets, and in my case, because I was a set designer, it was the foreground. But all of those things going into the experience of the audience, how they understood what the really strong message was, just incremental changes. And I loved it, but I always knew that I was going to be half in and half out. I was always looking for something that could be really, really useful with those skills, but not actually working in the theater, because it's a very hard life. And this was, I started mid-90s studying theater design, and it was at a time that, as you were saying, very new to human-centered design. And I grew up, born mid-70s, I grew up not knowing that design was anything other than a Pantone color. So when I got to university, it was a very long transition for me to get into design for the theater. And then my hero was Robert Lepage, actually, and he does an incredible amount of collaboration amongst all of the artists on stage and in his rehearsal halls and the designers. And and what I thought was interesting about that is that he took one concept and stretched that out into different ways. So he'll take the concept of winter, for example, and think about everything around it. And he is the creative director. However, the hierarchy of ideas doesn't exist. You have to sort of have an openness, and there's a language of collaboration that he fosters.
Within the context of performing arts and theater.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. Specifically his style. And that was a strong influence on me because everything I had known was hierarchical. Someone at the top makes a decision and everybody else. Exactly.
Yep.
Even in the arts, sometimes even especially in the arts. And in 2006, I went to the Canadian Film Centre Interactive Media Lab. And back at that time, it was called Habitat. And I was flooded with influences of new media, and at that time, it was becoming interactive media. So it was no longer sort of this upstart in disrupting the traditional media business. It became a place for new technologies to tell new stories. And so we had people from all over the world doing film festivals on their phones and using gigantic rooms as gamified objects and things like that. Just so really cool. Lovely, yeah. Shout out to Susan and Matt Garbett for their tremendous, awesome. And also everyone who ran that. Anna Serrano. Anyway. Yeah.
Sounds familiar. CFC?
Yes.
That's
nice.
it.
Yeah.
Well done.
And now Idea Boost.
Nice.
So when I left the residency at the CFC, it was such a strong impression of collaborative technical skills in order to get a product or an experience together that we all overlapped in how we talked about the customer experience or the audience experience. I missed that in theater, and now fast forward by 10 years, I was working at Rogers Media and Post Media, which is the newspaper chain, and with massive corporations that really cared about interactions on page views, on clicks, on just the smallest quantitative impression, whereas I'd been working in qualitative impressions all of this time. And so when I got to work in organizations that large, I saw that the storytelling was really, really, really important. And in order to get longevity and heart and meet the right people where they're at. So I started to refine my understanding of advertising by working in advertising and new media all together, and had some great recognition for my ability to understand this narrative arc between what somebody expects when they come up to an experience, what they get, and how the author or the creator or the collaborators create an exit for that. And so when I think about my work now in the present and the future, it's a continuation of that through line. So where are we now? When we look around the world, what is it that we expect the future to bring? And then beyond that, what is agency that we have as people in that narrative to play a part or not play a part?
Right.
So this is where myself and David Buwalda founded Futures Present, and we simply help people to practice long-term thinking.
Very cool.
And we come from all sorts of, design and community building backgrounds and learning and education, all those things to help construct experiences where people feel safe to be able to talk about a narrative that they don't know exists, to prototype the future. And so all the interactions that we do are really understanding a context first. And so what we just boiled our consultancy down to is helping people with long-term thinking. So
Very
that,
cool.
whatever sort of the challenges that we want to help people with is exactly that, the mental mechanism, the framework, the creating space, all of the technology from a human aspect around thinking about the future. It's not so easy.
Very cool. So jumping right into the questions, given that both of you have a background in the creative fields, human-centered design, and how tech interacts with all of that, there's one very interesting stat that I read recently that I'm going to read out. This is from a McKinsey Global Institute report. Even as it causes declines in some occupations, automation will change many more. 60% of occupations have at least a 30% of constituent work activities that could be automated. So in an age where the speed of technologies like artificial intelligence and automation is outpacing our ability to be agile enough to keep up with, how has increasing advancement in tech affected the way you work?
So yeah, it was a big question.
Loaded question.
We loved it, and Maggie and I actually spent a long time noodling on it, and we were struggling because we really wanted to talk about things from a personal perspective, and then how are we seeing it. The first thing I want to say before I get into the whole personal thing is that technology, the way it's being positioned. So even your stat. It's positioning it as something very negative.
Negative, exactly.
But what's interesting is that the whole idea of technology, through the get-go, from the very start of creating things, was to make our lives easier. It was about us first. It was people-centric first, and it was about augmenting who we are. What's been interesting is, especially now, is that change is happening so rapidly, and everything that we've put in place is not keeping up with it. And so it's about process. So what I wanted to say was that as you were hearing my story back in the 80s, what it took to design anything, how we had to construct things like a factory so we could go from here to here, even just pooling that multidisciplinary team at IBM from a design perspective was the first time we were able to get stuff out the door that much faster because we were combining all of the expertise that were in the room together, and that accelerates change, but we all had the perspectives to enable that to happen.
Right.
You can imagine technology, and this is still happening, where technology and design don't work together. Technology is created on assumptions, and the assumptions are based on biases that people naturally have because of their own experiences. We only know what we know, and the only way we're going to know more is having more people, more perspectives in the room when we're helping design stuff. So if you can imagine back in the 80s and the 90s, I was saying to Maggie earlier that in the 90s they had the big bust because we were designing stuff, but we didn't have the technology to back it up. And so it was a lot of dreaming. We had dreamware, but it didn't work. And so that's why a lot of companies didn't work. There was a lot of investment in the dream. What's so cool about now in 2019, especially the last 10 years, it's been insane, is that we're living all these things that we used to dream. All the stuff that I'm a science fiction junkie, and all the stuff we used to read about, we're living it. So whether that storyline actually influenced where we went or not is interesting. But the whole point, and why I'm telling you all that, is that this conversation that Maggie and I had earlier was really about, is it a negative thing? It could be. In fact, I mean, we're seeing that already from a privacy perspective and how we use technology. All of these challenges are starting to bubble up super fast. How we work is being challenged all the time. There's so much disruption. Bringing new technologies in, we're going to have all kinds of examples. Maggie will have examples as well. And Maggie, join in because I know you have a lot to say on it, but this could be more of a conversation than me just rattling off stuff.
Sure.
So do you want to give some of the examples that you spoke about then, or?
Which example came to mind?
Oh, well, this is when we were talking, or maybe I'm combining two different conversations that we had, which is very possible. But we were talking about even technologies like how we use Uber and Lyft and that kind of stuff, the disruption it has, the fact how AI and robots are taking over various jobs, but what happens to people.
Yeah.
It's not a people-centric concept.
I would actually just jump in there to say the narrative that's been painted, as you said, has been very negative, but very media influenced, because the media portrays it as, oh, you're going to lose all your jobs, right? But statistically, it's always been a net positive, right? With any industrial revolution that has happened, whether it's the steam train or electronics, or this is quote unquote industry 4.0, right, where the critical mass, where we hit critical mass of using and applying emerging tech like IoT, blockchain, and AI within how we work. The perception of it is negative, but I think in reality the impact of it is actually positive, right? But
well, you don't see it when you're in transition.
Oh,
and,
no,
and because people are adding these things without looking at the fallout.
Would you say that we're in transition?
Yes, big time. Oh yeah, and we're going to continue to be in transition for years to come, because technology is not going to slow down. It's only going to increase. That's why we talk about these other skills that we need to be able to keep up with it.
Personally, have you guys, because you've been in the entrepreneurship and tech scene since the 80s, early 90s even, right? Over the course of the years, how has technology or tech influenced your own work?
Well, I can start from being a studio artist and saying where I am now, and it's actually really hamstrung my ability to be creative by just working with the 15-inch screen and not having a desk that is 4x8, and being able to step forward and look very closely at whatever it is that I'm drawing, or stand way back 10 feet away and just have that physical ability to decide when something could be blurry and when it isn't. And so instead, as somebody who's very kinesthetic and very visual, having a computer screen is actually very, very, very detrimental to my thought process. And when you type, all of the keys are the same physically, whether or not you're typing E and it's going into the word sex, for example, or you're typing the word E and it starts with economy. You don't get a different sensation from when you're using your hand and writing and deciding whether to move the pen this way or that way, or push hard or whatever. So from a day-to-day work standpoint, I go back to as much as I can, as often as I can, and you could see
pen
in my
and
notebook.
paper.
Yeah, I could show you my notebook after. It looks like a madwoman, which is great. I love.
Mine too.
I feel very good because I have paper and a pen in front of me, and feel very, I guess, panicked almost when I can't move to think. So that's that one particular part of how technology has impacted. Another is bringing that theater and the narrative mindset into the work that I do when I'm making something for other people. It's trying to acknowledge or create assumptions and then move through them to support broader use cases than ones that we just assume and make up. So one particular exercise that I did when I was with my teaching my students, I'd have them storyboard a trip to the library, pick out a book, and then come back to the classroom. And then I would have them go do it, and one student would be taking notes, watching the other student, and there'd be a stopwatch and everything. So it was a very small exercise, comparing what they assumed would happen on their trip to the library and what actually happened.
Right.
And then charting the emotional journey with that, and really doing a lot of editing. And that just one little thing was help them to sort of relax into, wow, I don't know everything, and I don't need to know everything, and there is a way to find much more as a, kind of through physical experience, it taught them that we are humans first, and technology is, yes, the media does say, doom and gloom, and we're going to lose a lot of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just because it leads.
Well, it's because we feed off of negative news, right?
It is happening. It's not that people aren't losing their jobs. They're losing certain kinds of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a question of what are we enabling them with? They're still very, very smart individuals and very creative individuals. And how is it that we can support them to learn new skills at the same time during this transition, and not be afraid of it, because it's the end of the road. It's actually the beginning of another road. So what are the things that we can put in place to make that happen? And for the new companies coming up, all the new startups, they're already starting to think that way, because technology is changing, especially the tech companies that are starting to happen, that they want to keep up with it. And in order to do that, they have to be training and learning as they're producing and creating their products and services that they're doing. So it's an interesting, that never used to happen before, where if you did do training, I'm going back to my IBM days, they would put you in a classroom, you go away for a week, and then you come back and you're supposed to know all this new stuff, and that's it. But the thing is, it's actually you're learning as you're doing. It's a different concept, and there are different skills that you need to do that. And that's why there's in the schools, so whether it's high schools, hopefully junior schools too, and definitely in the universities and colleges, they're applying these new skills that you need to have to keep up with technology. If you do that, then I think there's a lot of hope. So that the positive side of it is it's being recognized that it's not the end of the road, it's the beginning. But you have to service and support that beginning to create new avenues to learn. And the other thing is, again, it's just part of my generation, we were taught most people would have one job, they'd work for a big company or whatever company forever, and they'd get your pension, and then you're out the door. And so there's a whole bunch of new stuff that I'm going to throw in there, because people are not dying at 65 or 70.
Val, don't say that.
But they're staying. They're going to live to be 90, 100, and so it's not like people like myself. I have tons of friends who are still working and thriving, but they need the knowledge now to continue on. This needs to be a common thing, so that knowledge is baked into whatever we do, so we can continue to learn.
Yeah, it's a good segue to a follow-up question of so this wave or this pace of change is only going to pick up, right? It's only going to compound, and change has always been happening and is going to continue to happen. As individuals, the notion of self-disruptor or get disrupted is also super applicable, right? In your opinion, is this something we can prepare for? Will we be able to prepare for when an AI bot can do our job better than we can, and then we're left to a different job, a new job that requires more creativity, more problem solving? I don't know, hypothetical, putting it out there, but is this type of change something we can prepare for?
I think yes, but this is a great one for Maggie. What do you think, Maggie?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with mindset. So if you know that it's coming and you are hell-bent on staying exactly where you are, that's not going to help you to learn.
Totally.
So starting is the hardest part. And then, when you start.
That was a gem. Starting is the hardest part. Yeah.
There's probably a couple songs out there too. Breaking up. Anyway, and so when you have a cognizance of change, that there is something that you want to have, you're sort of pulled into the future, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. The allure of doing well or feeling better than you are now, without going into too much theory, but the fear of change is actually arresting and makes things worse. So there's ways of sort of role playing or investigating what it might feel like after the change has happened to you. And you're talking about jobs, but if we actually opened that up a little bit to say career,
Yep.
or so maybe your career will stay the same, or maybe, in some cases your industry will completely disappear.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can prepare mentally by rooting yourself in your values and your the things that you love and hold dear to you that make you human.
Yeah.
That is something that will carry you over some of the difficult changes of learning new software, having skills that you used to be an expert at, and no longer can get hired for. Is taking some of those transferable skills, abilities, desires, goals, and rising above the grit of the day-to-day. In foresight practice, which is something that happens most of the time, it's done for organizations, and they ask an organization, how are you going to do well in 20 or 30 years from now if the situation is, the economy is really bad for you, or if you have zero competitors, what are you going to do then? And we're just starting to see people applying that kind of thinking to their own personal life. So if I chart my life as just 20-year example, the size of house that I've lived in has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, as opposed to bigger and bigger and bigger, which is the dream of the 20th century. So, but I'd say conversely, the satisfaction of life is, I'm seeing that become more and more of a priority in the 21st century. So again, with job, career, well-being, it's that's some of the mental preparation, some of the, I guess, practical preparation, to go out and get the monies, is we're referring to a T-shape person as a concept of someone who has a really broad depth of knowledge. So whether it's in something that's managerial or building, engineering,
technical, yep.
Exactly. So having those skills on both sides, and then soft skills like collaboration and communication, really creating quite a thick layer of being able to operate in a career outside of just the job description that you have. And then, so that's the top of the T, and then the bottom of the T is deep knowledge in some particular industry or some passion that you have, or understanding yourself in the way that you work. And for example, I just talked about how I work kinesthetically, or how I understand things kinesthetically. I've turned that into part of my job, part of my business, by moving Post-it notes around and using Lego and Play-Doh and stuff like that. And I see that other people are doing the same in order to get into their next job, their next career, their next transition, is learning more and more about what drives them, regardless of number of hours, regardless of money, regardless of...
so more intrinsic, like, motivators, as opposed to, like, getting a paycheck every month. Or
well, yeah, and it depends. What's interesting is why do you work? So that's another huge question. A lot of people, it actually upsets me when I find out that why people work. A lot of them do it to make a paycheck. And wouldn't it be very interesting if you actually worked because you have all of these skills and all this knowledge and all of these gifts that you come to play with, and you can actually make money using them. And why are we not teaching our children to be more entrepreneurial? So as you were talking, I was thinking, well, what would help the fear of change? So if you're in a job and you've learned to do a thing, and you've gotten this job and you've been doing it and then all of a sudden you don't have it, that's not preparing you for the world. But if you had entrepreneurial literacy, if you had financial literacy and you had digital literacy, you actually could jump ship and then do something that makes you feel good and makes you feel worthwhile. And that's, if I was going to dream for the world, that would be it, so that we could all do what we love to do and add have value and impact to the rest of the world. So again, it's that whole, it's these are different kinds of skills. I actually don't like that they're called soft skills. And
it's such a like misleading name.
it is. Well, it's saying they're unimportant. They're actually critical skills that we were never taught, that a number of us have just picked them up because of our own experience and over time. And it enables you to have confidence and apply what you do know in various ways. And what's so cool is, this is where, you're going to celebrate humanity, is each one of us really enjoys some certain things. I work with people who love to research and get into the nitty-gritty and all the detail. I don't. Like, it kills me. I can't remember anything. I like looking from the highest place and very high level, because I see patterns and I like to put people and things together so something marvelous will happen.
Yep.
And that's my gift. And then I work with other people who, well, like Maggie, who is just brilliant, being able to just take stuff, get people to people who are just listening aren't seeing my hands going a million. Because what she does, she's able to pull things out of people, things that they didn't never realize that they had, and apply them in a certain way so that they can prepare for the future. So like we all have all of these. You, Prieeyya, you have energy up the yin yang. You are not afraid of anything. You put things together like that. Do you know what a gift that is?
I'm very afraid.
Come on. You might say it, but I see what you do. And the thing is that we need all of us in this room. So I think it's very important that we all can take these great gifts that we have and apply them in multiple ways. Technology shouldn't scare us, but how do you stop the fear? One more little story, and it is because people of my generation, a lot of them are, I'll say between 50 and 65 at the moment, because this is where they are losing their jobs, because they were in traditional jobs and they were supposed to be in for the long haul, and all of a sudden it ain't there anymore. And they're freaking out because you know what they do? They go back to the want ads. Of course they go online because of course they know how to do that, and they know how to Google, and they know how to, but they're not getting those jobs. They're answering the call for jobs, and thousands of people are applying for the same job. They're not getting it.
Yep.
If they had the entrepreneurial skills, meaning that they know how to create the job, and it doesn't even mean that they have to be a founder, but they would look for something that would match their skill base in a way that they never imagined before. You are not your job title. That's another thing that that we're discovering. But if they did, they actually could thrive. And there's a whole bunch of new programs out there that are helping people of my generation to get that to reinvent themselves. I just heard Seneca actually has a kind of a reinvention, reinvent your career or something like that. They have a new program. That's cool. But I think we have to bring those skills to bear so that this transitioning, using more and more digital, which means we have to be ready for all kinds of things that are going to come our way and change. We just have to be prepared for it.
You reminded me of a couple of things when you were talking about soft skills. It's interesting how hard skills, soft skills, you could almost line those up against gender stereotypes, and so it's maybe that's there's a bit of a hierarchy in there. But I started thinking about task-based things.
Yes, yeah.
And so you've got a job, and maybe there's 5 different tasks that you have to do every day in that job, and all of a sudden 3 of them have changed in order to still do the same type of job. Again, that's a not what you do, but how you do sort of thing. So something just in that, the attitude about learning something so that instead of losing the task as you know it to be, you are gaining something that without doing the task as you know it to be, you are gaining, and they talk a lot about higher function. So it just came from Element AI, and they've created some AI platform to help underwriters work faster. And
very cool.
Yep. Insurance claims take a long time to go through. So we can help them, we can help everybody.
Saving the world.
So when this specific software is focused on that specific job, and it helps them to move into a more strategic thought process. If we go back to making technology work for people and the black box and the fear, and I hope I'm not confusing the issue by bringing all these things together in one thought, but my cumulative point is that technology will take adoption and sit in it, in a place when people use it. And there's going to be...
Interesting.
That's so true. Really good point.
Cool. As you guys were talking, I had a thought that will probably bring us into the next lens of how this is going to impact us as a community. What do you think about... the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, claims that the top layer of the pyramid is self-actualization, and forgive me if my thought is not fully put together, but the question is, do you think that technology will push us as a community to strive for self-actualization versus being in that sort of middle area of survival? Does that make sense? Or let me find a way to rephrase it. So
no, I think I'm getting it. I'm going to take a crack at it, and then you can steer me in another way. Because as you're saying about self-actualization, I actually do believe that that's true. I'm thinking about how in my current role, really I'm a relationship person. And everything's about connection. And technology has now allowed me to create all kinds of connection and see people from multiple perspectives, get behind their eyes so that we can move things along. Because as I was saying before, one of my biggest discoveries in my lifetime is the fact that we need all of us, as many of us, to give us the perspectives we need to accelerate change. And so how do you connect with them? And then how do I think about that? What I learned is that there's multiple roles that you're going to take in any given time. There is a leadership role, and there's a follower role, and there's a support role. All of those people. Again, that's why titles drive me crazy, because at any given time
you're never just one thing.
You're a whole bunch of things at different times, depending on where you are, and how you're working. Technology enables you to do that. I'm thinking about all the different products that we can use to help us be more efficient. At the end of the day, though, and I really liked what you were saying, Maggie, about the whole task-based thing. You and I have talked about this too, and actually, Prieeyya, you and I have talked about it too, about the whole idea of people-centric economy. The whole idea of a people-centric economy, which comes from i4j.info, it's a fabulous forum that's really trying to create a movement of enabling people to create a better economy, an economy that is more people-centric, which is not so much tech worry-centric. What they say is that before this whole concept started to really emerge through technology, the industrial age was really a task-based economy. We did things that just did something. We got together, moved in factories, did the whole industrial factory lineup so that we could get stuff done efficiently to get a thing done. And we created all these different cogs. Now we're actually creating multiple wheels. That's why we're accelerating, because each one of us becomes the wheel to help that acceleration.
Wow.
But we need different skills to enable us to be those wheels. Technology allows us to do that. It gets our head out of the day-to-day shit that we have to worry about.
Plain and simple.
I've never heard it described that way. You just blew my mind, actually. I love the multiple wheels analogy.
Cool.
And I don't want to actually add a little bit of nuance to that, in that technology is built, pretty much anything is built to do a function or multiple functions, or if you're creating a platform, whether it's a digital platform or a social platform, there's always decorum in it, and some things are always in and some things are always out. So a wheel isn't a wheel, in that you can't have a car tire on a baby stroller, and you can't have a grocery cart wheel on...
So true. Oh my God. Now
awesome.
my mind is blown.
The self-driving Volvo truck with Jean-Claude Van Damme. and the squeaky shopping cart wheel. Um, changes the commercial a lot. So, but this is again the difference between technology and humans, is that humans can adapt and change in a much more fluid way than technology can. And I, for one, am not at all worried about AI taking over the world, because it is designed extremely well, but it will always be in some sort of silo. It can't give you, mother's love. It can't give you at the same time as being a chairlift.
Right.
Got,
it serves each at like one function at a time.
Yeah. So
right.
I'm not worried that we are going to be completely replaced by robots, cyborgs, whatever. I don't think people are as good as that. If there was, immediate replications of people, I think that the computers would be very embarrassed for themselves.
Immediate replications of people? Is that what you said?
Yeah. I would love a better version of me.
Oh God. Please. I want a younger version of me. Thank you very much.
But when you're asking the question in a binary way about survival versus self-actualization, something that gives me peace a lot is remembering that we think of the future in trends. We don't think of the future in specific granular ways, the patina, the differences, and so on. So instead of Maslow's hierarchy, I like to think of the way humans operate beyond the survival of food, water, shelter, health. That there's a framework called by Max Neef, Manfred Max Neef, and he has 9 different fundamental human needs.
Cool.
And they're in a circle instead of in a triangle, so there is no hierarchy. And some of the things in this are the need for freedom, creativity, expression, connectivity, and so on. And these are things that we can make a really, really, really strong, push for, argument for, sacrificing other things, like comfort in one particular area for another, but that we tend to not go all in on that one thing, because then eventually we'll end up missing some of the other things that I've mentioned. Definitely check it out. I learned about it a couple years ago.
Just looking at it right now, it's like a circular diagram almost, right? Very cool.
And so you can be putting a lot of effort into obtaining leisure, but it doesn't stay always on leisure, because if you liege too much, you'll never eat.
Yeah.
So that
liege. So stealing that.
Hashtag liege. But that we are dynamic throughout the day, and so the paradox isn't survival versus self-actualization, it's silo versus dynamic.
Makes sense.
That's good. Yeah.
Cool. Going into another perspective of the influence that tech, not just tech, but entrepreneurship and innovation has on disrupting enterprise level companies or large companies. And I know that both of you have experience in or background in this. What do you think the role of like intra-entrepreneurship is within companies to whether it is develop a culture or mindset of innovation? At Collision, there was one talk that was super interesting. I forget her name, but it was the EVP of Microsoft who was talking about it's not David versus Goliath anymore, it's David and Goliath. Right? So with that context, what do you think the role of entrepreneurship and innovation within companies are today, and how that's going to keep large, specifically enterprise level companies thriving and relevant in an age where you have startups popping up and disrupting everything left, right, and center.
Well, the good news, I think, especially in the last few years, is that although corporations have been talking about innovation forever, on all the big ones you can think about, there's some practice that's starting to emerge within the corporation, but it's really difficult. Corporations are very huge. They're huge. They're very hierarchical. There's a million layers of middle management that where management is told by executives that they have to meet various quotas and you have to do it this way, and the expectation is then those people who are on the ground who are producing service or product have to get all this stuff done against quotas that are constantly rising. That's the industrial way of doing things. And now we've hit a place where, you're right, all of these smaller companies are coming and eating their lunch in various areas because they're fast, they're flexible, they're
nimble,
things,
right?
They can do things less expensively and that kind of stuff. So what's interesting is that, and we've been going into companies now that are asking us to look at their innovation strategies and say, why isn't it working? So one of the first things is to be innovative. You have to be open for change. And the change that has to happen, especially in culture change is not something you can turn a switch on, and it's not checking a whole bunch of boxes. Creating an incubator is not checking a whole bunch of boxes. It's a way of being, a way of enabling people to be creative, to be innovative, to make some mistakes and that kind of stuff. That whole fail fast thing, actually, I probably did more harm than good, just letting you know, because people go, oh, I don't want to fail. And the trouble with the word fail, sorry, it's a little side note, is that it sounds very final. When you fail, when you try something new, when you create a pilot and do anything like that, it changes actually. It's what you do with the failure. So when it doesn't work, you had an idea, you put it in practice, you made it small so you just could see it, whether it's going to work or not, switch gears, try something else.
Being iterative.
Yes,
Is the key.
And that whole idea of being nimble. So playing it that way and not using the big F word of failure, it really is about iteration. It's about trying various things and enabling that to be part of the process. And when you're doing your project management for all the, like in a corporation, that's what happens. We're going to do these projects, we're going to meet the client's needs, and you make a little bit of wiggle room for innovation to actually happen. The other thing that we're starting to see is that things are being co-created with a client. Before, these large companies would deliver a product and they were given what the parameters were. Now all of a sudden what's happening is that clients and the people who are working for them, so whether they're a consulting company or they're a product company, a big tech company or whatever, they're now coming together like partners. And so everyone's in bed with one another, and then that actually is accelerating change in a much better way. But that's a process change. We recently did some work in a law firm, and they truly wanted to become more innovative, and they created a separate department for innovation. And nothing was working. It was about a year went by, and so when we went in, we discovered a few things. Number one is that innovation is a horizontal. It needs to be everywhere. It is not something you keep separate as an idea. It's actually, as we were saying, it's a way of being. The second thing is, in a law firm, you've got the executives, you've got partners, and you've got associates. Associates are, number one, usually they're younger. They are more tech savvy. And they're the ones who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to clients. So if you think about it, they're really in the know about what clients really want and what's going wrong, what's going right, and all of those kinds of things.
Right.
And then they give the information to the partners. But partners are rewarded for billable hours, and they've always had a way of doing things. So what ends up happening is associates have to take all their stuff that they're learning and doing on the ground level, then have to interpret it so that it fits into who the partners are and how they work, and then the partners, they answer what the executives have asked them to do. And then what if happens is, what if executives actually had a direct line to the associates, so they got the intel of what's really happening on the ground? Would they have a different message to their partners? And you can use that theory across all corporations. And all that means is you're opening up the areas, you're changing a little bit of change on process, on how information is disseminated, within your organization. And you can apply this to everything. It sounds easy. It is not easy to do. but when that happens, innovation can happen. And then you have to do that not only within your organization, you also have to connect to everyone who's outside your organization. You need to keep up with what the new technologies are. You actually have to partner with them as well, invite them in. It's confusing. I know it's very noisy out there, but there are various ways of bridging that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to change the fail faster to a different 4-letter word.
Oh, good.
Play fast, play faster.
Play faster. I like that. That's good.
Because there's something very, I guess, liberating about thinking of this as a playful attempt. It's not, throwing 100%
Do or
of the
die.
energy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you bring it down from a whole overhaul to let's just try it with this one little section of the company, and not assume that it's going to be perfect the first time. What are we going to learn from it? It's not a failure. It's what were the assumptions that we played with? And instead of validating your assumptions by saying, "Yep, absolutely, this was a table. I thought it was a table. I validated it." When in fact, actually, to say, well, my assumption is that it's a table, but actually if it gets turned upside down, then maybe it's a tray, or whatever it is. Sorry for speaking in crazy images.
I like it.
But I wanted to add a little bit of an anecdote about 2 companies that I worked on. One was 150 years old, the other one was about a year and a half old. And both of them, I knock on wood, do extraordinarily well in their transitions. However, both of them had a huge amount of energy and force and will to survive. However, they were running their organizations in past formats. So the first one was, here's a product, let's sell the physical asset, and when they could no longer sell the physical asset, okay, let's sell it as a digital asset and see if we can make the same amount of money by matching the physical and the digital part in prices. And when I, just to relate that to the law firm, for example, a lot of the software that's coming in and replacing some of the quote-unquote billable hours is similar to when photographers went from film to digital. And if we could transpose the value of a digital image from a digital camera versus a film camera, the image itself still had the same amount of thought and process and skill and everything that went into it. It quote unquote looked like it was faster. Same thing with my experience with a law firm is that they were worried about the optics of charging the same price for faster service. But in fact, it's the same output at the end of the day. Who cares how it gets,
valued.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the 150-year-old company was trying to look backwards. At what is it that we're losing, and sort of this quicksand thing. And instead of saying, we're going to lose something, we have no idea what we're going to gain, but we're only going to look forward. And looking forward is so freeing. And you can start to slough off parts of your company or parts of your business practice or products or whatever that don't actually fulfill the future bill. I heard a really, really great story about, I think it's 1-800-Flowers, and I'm really, really sorry if this is the wrong name of that company.
1-800-Flowers?
Yeah, it's like a FTD florist sort of delivery.
Oh, cool.
Now I'm in trouble with everybody. But the founder grew his company by 4 times because he had every employee ask the question, is this helping me sell flowers? With every particular task.
That's it.
So great. Yeah. So, if you're cleaning up the office, is that so that you can be in a better space to focus on the work that you're doing? Are you fundraising with a gardening center, saying that you really support children's gardening activities, versus a fundraising for something that isn't directly connected to flowers and happiness and health and friendship and whatever celebration that sort of is. So the company that was a year and a half that also had a tremendous will and thirst to succeed, physically they were in an old factory, and they were being managed like the people were machines in this 20th century, instead of managing the people like they were minds. And so what's going to happen when we start to, and we're seeing a little bit of this, but probably not in as many places as we could be, which is managing minds, and what happens when you get the sleepies in the afternoon, and what happens when some people really hit their stride because they're...
That's so interesting.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Managing minds. Yeah.
So how can we work to the body clock
Yeah.
instead of the 9 to 5 clock?
As opposed to like the I guess stereotypical view is that maximizing productivity is the only metric that we're looking for, right? But that's also taking it as if we're machines to like maximize output and efficiency and...
Well, yes, and I love that you did that example, because we're not a factory, and the thing is that we could actually maximize product by looking at how we are as human beings and what our needs are throughout the day. And that's, again, I mean, we're seeing this emerge as far as flexible working places, how we work, whether you can come in and sit at a desk and sit in a co-working space, or whether you can sit in a large office or you can work at home, and you should have a choice of all of those things. Sometimes it just depends. I just one other comment on this line of thinking, because I love it, was someone could say, well, could AI, if we're going to be managing minds, so with AI, how far can we go with that? And one of the things you said earlier was the fact, you started to talk about creativity. And I know I've seen some aspects of creativity coming through some of the technologies that people are trying their hand at having AI be creative.
Creative, yeah.
And in a sense, it is creative in that it's trying various things. But what doesn't come with it is the whole emotional will and experiences to apply from that particular person or sets of people together, but through emotion. And the emotional part is, I don't know, I'm just saying, I'm thinking about it and saying it at the same time because I don't know whether this is true, but I believe that that's something that AI, I don't think can do.
Yeah.
And it's yeah.
Like how would you program emotional will? Do you
I'm
know
thinking
what
of
I mean?
Star Trek right now, and and they had programmed him with emotion. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, so that's a whole nother topic. Sorry to get off.
No, I you're really onto something here. I want to hear more about what you're thinking in emotional will.
Well, I was thinking about what makes humans so special, and one of the things. Now I'm going to get kind of sappy, but it's the whole idea about love and how we react and are impacted by other human beings, how we have to feel that we need to make an impact, how we feel that we need to learn all the time. Again, at my great age, I was starting to think, well, why are we here? Having that grand question. And I believe as human beings that we are on earth to make impact, but to learn. If you were to see that, and that's enough. Because as human beings, I think that's the best that you can do. But what is that about? Well, that's about our relationship with other human beings, with Earth, with all the things of nature. And now we're adding technology that enhances that.
Right.
It also blocks it too.
Yeah, I hate saying that, but you
well,
can.
I mean, I'm not trying to be down on technology or designers it's something that I struggle with, which is you can design something so well for one person. For example, you can get a fitting done for your leg cast or whatever, and that won't fit even your other leg. But how can you make that efficient? And someone mentioned once that if you're reading your body metrics and measurements and your physical attributes and so on, that perhaps there might be a way of extracting that data and then making a having a 3D
Like
printer.
personalized.
Yeah, so like you can go into a catalog and say, I need to have this officeware, and it gets 3D printed on a machine,
That's
textile
insane.
machine, and then comes to you without having to go to the store. And it's no longer small, medium, and large, and you having to fit.
But
to the
that's in
clothing.
existence right now. We already
Yes.
have that.
Yes.
And so that's a way of being efficient and keeping our individuality at the same time. I love 3D printing. I think that's super cool.
Although, if your body doesn't conform to the norm in some way, like if you can't get the measurements off of a particular part of somebody's body,
Well, I was going to say, though, they have technology for that, too. Because, God, I actually know a few startups now where you're going to take a simple camera and it is going to do the outline of your particular body with your particular nuances and all of that stuff.
Excellent.
And then it gets translated into patterns for various clothing and that kind of stuff.
Excellent.
I would imagine over time we could also measure our own brain waves and how we think and that kind of stuff, so that we can also, as we're augmenting ourselves, we'll be able to do it in a way that's very customizable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, so now I'm thinking of, in the future, we're actually going to be more demanding about having things more customized. We already are. We're already more demanding about customization, about how we want it for the individual, because we know it can happen. It's weird.
I know, I love that, and I'm also curious about how will someone who's in their early 80s now, for example, obtain that level of specific customization for their instance. So it kind of goes back to the wheel thing, where one wheel doesn't fit all purposes, and so
So what's interesting about what you're talking about is that we're not, that whole assembly line factory thing that's going to go away. We're actually going to create more and more customized products. I do hope that when we create these new products, that we also have a way of disposing them and having them recycled. But that's another story altogether. But the interesting thing, as far
should
as
be the same story.
it should be the same story. I know, but I don't know if we have enough time for that. But as far as customization, yeah, to me that's one of the demands that human beings are having today, because they know it's now possible. And now if I was to circle back to how we started the conversation, at least, I was thinking back in the 80s and early 90s when it was dream tech, it wasn't real tech. And we dreamt of that. We dreamt of how the world might be and how we might be able to live in it on our terms individually. And but at the end of the day, tech will never take away the fact that we need each other, and we thrive by being together. I think that's part of our humanity, is that human beings need other human beings to work with, to play with, to learn from. And that's when we say impact, that's what we mean. Right?
To bring it back all together, I think we're hitting time. Is the episode today was focused on the question, self-disrupt or get disrupted, right? So to end off, what is one thought or question or statement that you'd like to leave the people listening with within the context of this self-disrupt or get disrupted notion?
I think what comes to mind is really this whole idea of perpetual learning, and what is it that we need to keep, what is it that we need to expose ourselves throughout our lifetime. This is lifetime learning now. This is not you go to school, you graduate from university, and that's it. I'm done with what I'm learning. You're learning every day of your life. And to me, that's a really great place. So you won't be disrupted because you'll be ready for disruption. And there are skills to be learned to enable that to happen.
Cool.
And I think there's no facts about the future. And so when you come down to a place where you've seen that to be true, even 1 minute is different than the next minute. It's always dynamic, always changing. When you let go of the fact that the future is predetermined, being self-disruptive is just, I guess, understanding that you have assumptions and there's no facts about the future, and those two things can disrupt your current paradigms and your current habits. If you are to be disrupted, that's already happening to you at every second of every day. And so how much are you going to ignore that fact?
Wow.
That's where
That's a really good one. Well, that wraps us up for the first episode, oh my God, of the Future of Podcast with our guests, Val Fox from The Pivotal Point, previously the DMZ, and Maggie Greyson from from Futures Present. Big shout outs to also Revive Films, who are our video people and have helped us and helped me. They also run and do their own podcast, and part of why I was so motivated to start was they also started, just they had an idea and did it, right? So thank you for mentoring me. And awesome. I hope this goes somewhere. Cool. That's it. Thank you for joining us, and for everyone who's listened or watched, thank you.
Thank you for your thought-provoking questions.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Bye.